What if everything you know about Africa is wrong? For decades, the world has associated this continent with poverty, conflict, and crisis. But behind those headlines lies one of the greatest untold stories in human history. This is the continent that once helped build empires, changed global trade, and became the prize of the world's most powerful nations. More than a century ago, the great powers fought to control Africa. Today, they are returning once again. But this time, the battle looks very different. The question is, what is hidden inside Africa that has made the world's biggest powers look in the same direction? All over again. To answer that, we have to go back to where this story really began. For generations, the world has looked at Africa through the same lens. Poverty, conflict, disease, and endless humanitarian crises. Those images became so common that millions of people began to believe they represented the whole continent. But they don't, because the real Africa tells a very different story. Stretching across more than 30 million square kilometers, Africa is the second largest continent on Earth, home to over 1.5 billion people, thousands of languages, countless cultures, and some of the richest natural resources ever discovered. Beneath its soil lie enormous reserves of gold, diamonds, copper, uranium, cobalt, lithium, and many of the critical minerals that modern technology depends on. The smartphones in our pockets, the batteries inside electric vehicles, the data centers powering artificial intelligence, and even advanced military equipment, all rely on materials found in remarkable abundance across Africa. So if this continent holds so much wealth, why has it spent so much of modern history struggling? The answer isn't hidden beneath the ground. It's hidden in the past. To understand why the world is fighting for Africa again, we first have to understand the moment when powerful nations decided Africa was something to be divided. In 1884, leaders from Europe's most powerful empires gathered in Berlin, Germany. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, and several others. Their mission wasn't to end a war or build peace. It was to decide who would control Africa. The most shocking part, not a single African leader was invited. Around a conference table, foreign governments drew lines across a map, creating borders that ignored ancient kingdoms, tribes, languages, and cultures that had existed for centuries. Entire communities were separated overnight. Others with long histories of rivalry were forced into the same new countries. For Europe, it was a race for land, gold, rubber, and influence. For millions of Africans, it marked the beginning of colonial rule that would reshape the continent for generations. When African nations finally gained independence during the 20th century, the colonial borders remained. Many of today's political tensions, border disputes, and internal conflicts can still be traced back to those decisions made in Berlin over a century ago. But the story didn't end when colonial rule collapsed, because as one empire after another disappeared, new global powers arrived, each determined to expand its influence in a different way. By the 1960s, one African country after another gained independence. To millions of people, it looked like the colonial era was finally over. But the world's biggest powers weren't ready to walk away. As the Cold War divided the planet, Africa became one of its most important battlegrounds. The United States and the Soviet Union competed for influence, supporting different governments, funding allies, and turning local conflicts into global rivalries. When the Cold War ended, many believed foreign competition in Africa would finally disappear. Instead, a new chapter was just beginning. This time, the world's attention wasn't focused on controlling territory. It was focused on building influence. China invested billions of dollars in roads, railways, ports, and power plants. America strengthened new economic and security partnerships. Russia expanded its presence through military cooperation and resource agreements. Europe, Turkey, the Gulf states, and India also increased their investments across the continent. Different strategies, different promises, but the same destination. Once again, the world's major powers were moving toward Africa. The question was no longer, who would own the land? It was, who would secure its future? For decades, many people believed the world's biggest powers were investing in Africa out of generosity, development, or diplomacy. But beneath those promises, there was another reason, one that may shape the future of the global economy. The modern world doesn't run on oil alone anymore. It runs on critical minerals: cobalt, lithium, copper, graphite, nickel, rare earth elements. These aren't just ordinary resources. They power electric vehicles, smartphones, wind turbines, advanced military systems, and the artificial intelligence revolution. Without them, the technologies shaping the 21st century simply cannot exist. And some of the world's largest reserves of these minerals are found in Africa. That changes everything. Every new battery factory, every AI data center, every next-generation fighter jet, and every clean energy project begins with materials that many nations cannot produce on their own. Whoever secures these supply chains secures a major advantage in the future. Suddenly, China's investments, America's partnerships, Europe's new agreements, and Russia's growing presence all start to make sense. This isn't just a competition for influence. It's a competition for the resources that could define the next century. The battle for Africa is really a battle for tomorrow. For most of modern history, Africa has been seen as a continent full of potential. But today, that potential is becoming reality. By the middle of this century, Africa is expected to have one of the world's youngest and fastest-growing populations. While many developed nations face aging societies and shrinking workforces, Africa's workforce will continue to expand. Its cities are growing. Its technology sector is evolving. Its manufacturing capacity is increasing. And its role in global trade is becoming more important every year. For Africa, this could become the greatest opportunity in its history. But it could also become its greatest challenge. History has shown that natural wealth alone does not guarantee prosperity. The real question is, who will benefit from Africa's resources? Will they create stronger economies, better infrastructure, and greater opportunities for the people who live there? Or will the continent once again become a prize in someone else's competition? For more than a century, the world has come to Africa looking for wealth. This time, Africa has a chance to decide whether that wealth will finally shape its own future. And the answer to that question may influence the future of the entire world. More than 140 years ago, a group of powerful nations gathered around a table and decided Africa's future without asking the people who lived there. The consequences shaped the continent for generations. Today, the flags have changed, the strategies have changed, and the empires look different. But once again, the world's most powerful nations are competing for influence across Africa. Not because history has repeated itself, but because Africa has become too important to ignore. The future of artificial intelligence, clean energy, global trade, and the technologies that will shape the next century may all depend on what happens here. For the first time in modern history, Africa is not just part of the global story. It may become the place where the next chapter of that story is written. The question is no longer why the world is fighting for Africa again. The real question is, when this race is over, who will truly win? And perhaps even more importantly, will Africa finally become the greatest beneficiary of its own extraordinary wealth? Or will history write the same ending one more time?